Welcome to Reframe the podcast, helping you reframe your thought patterns, habits, and mindsets to create the life that you want to lead. Holly Moscrop describes herself as a 20-something Yorkshire lass. She is the writer, the blogger of One Girl and Her Cows, where she charts her life on the family farm. Holly's life on the family farm is slightly different. She suffers from long-term health issues, including ME, also known as chronic fatigue syndrome. However, despite having faulty health, Holly is determined to find her place within agriculture. She is an advocate and educator of disability, accessibility, and inclusivity in the countryside. I was so moved by Holly's words of just sage wisdom. She is incredibly wise and has a beautiful perspective on life and the world. I will be forever grateful to Holly for some of the insights she delivered in our chat. She is a very wonderful soul. Have you here today? I'm wondering whether or not you could start today by just telling our listeners a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do.
Well, thank you for having me here for a start. It's all new to me. I'm Holly, and well, I don't really do anything. It's more that my life is mainly managing my health, but I live on a farm, and part of living on the farm means that I get to do all the farm admin and watch cows, and kind of I call myself a backseat farmer, like a backseat driver, but without the I do the backseat farming, but not the physical farming.
Yeah, and still, and I imagine in your farming life, very integral and important to the process of running the farm. I mean, that backseat stuff.
Yeah, we'd definitely be shut down if I didn't do the admin part. So
Yeah, exactly.
Integral part.
And I would say you do stuff. I mean, you write beautifully.
Yeah,
you
I
have
write
a
a blog.
wonderful blog. When did you start blogging?
I started it. I started it with just an Instagram account at first, and then after a year, I thought, all right, I'm ready to actually take the plunge now. I'd known from the beginning I was going to one day start a blog and a website, and I thought I'd just kind of put myself in there gently, and thought in 2019 that I was ready to actually launch it as a blog.
What has that brought you? What's writing and blogging brought you?
It's brought me a connection to people that I wouldn't have otherwise have. I'm housebound, and I just farm bound now. But so I don't really come into contact with many people, and to be able to connect with so many different people across different areas of the country, and maybe change their mind a bit about things. Like, there's so much misinformation, isn't there? And out on the internet of like, this is scary, this is this, and to be able to get messages from people saying, oh, I didn't know that, that's really interesting, or oh, I'm so glad someone looks at things like that, or it's just it. And to be able to share that world with people, like, I'm so lucky to have this world outside my window that other people don't have, and don't, like people in cities and stuff, like they won't ever see seasons change across the fields like in that kind of way. And to share that gives people an insight into it, and that's what's like gets me through looking at the outside world. So it was kind of like I got this kind of window outside, and I see all these natural things happening, and I want others to be able to see that too.
Yeah, and the work you do, I would that's how I would kind of summarize it, as being both inspiring and educating. And I love that phrase you just used. I have this world outside my window. So you have a very, farming life is a unique life, isn't it? Before we kind of move on there, you obviously alluded to the fact that managing your health is something that is ongoing for you. Would you be comfortable to share a little bit more with our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I have ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis. It's also called chronic fatigue syndrome sometimes. I've had it since I was just turning 16. It kind of just hit me after a virus and never left. It like completely turned my like active, sporty, typical like girl that spends the whole time living outside, upside down, to being virtually bedbound. And that was like the end of the world for a long time. But I've learned kind of how to accept that and kind of manage my expectations of myself, basically learn to stop beating myself up for it. And at first had to really like teach myself that no, doing the usual, oh, push through, this isn't happening, you've got a plan. We've got a plan to do, like I had to learn how to stop and let it kind of wash over, and learn how to build a life within it. So that's what I do now, like 9 years on nearly. I just live this life within it and learn kind of how to stay within it. I've been really lucky to be one of the ones who have been able to experience some improvements. I'm no longer bedbound. I mean, some days are bad, but no longer always in bed. Found a kind of stability spot where we're just kind of coasting along and spend a lot of time in the house and some trips outside.
Oh, well, it's so lovely to hear you say those words, finding a life within it. I think that's a really, I'm trying to think of the word. I want to use the word inspiring again, but I feel like that sounds a bit patronizing, and I don't want to be patronizing. But actually, it's something that we can all apply, isn't it? When difficult times come, when difficult things challenge us, whether that be practically, emotionally, physically, you know, going on that journey to understand how you can build a life within it,
without fighting it.
Without fighting it. Yeah, exactly. And so how do you feel your relationship? You said something really wise there. You said, you know, I had to learn not to keep pushing through. I had to let it wash over me. And I suppose part of that, you know, what I'm hearing is that you learned to listen to what your body was telling you. Would that be right?
Definitely. I think if I had listened a lot earlier, I would have seen a lot more signs that I was already like developing a condition. And I just was not, like, I was just your typical teenager who doesn't listen. And who has all these plans, and typical like high achiever who has all these plans and like, oh, we're going to do GCSEs and then go on to university after A levels. And it was planned out, and it was like, this can't get in my way. And it was definitely a case of learning to listen to my body. And I'm very much, I know the signs now. I know whatever it's telling me, like, it's definitely opened up a kind of a conversation of, oh, I've done this. I know this is going to happen now. I can feel it coming. Right now, I need to do this to compromise for that.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I think so many of us can learn from those words about listening to our bodies, because we do, we push on through all the time. We're kind of conditioned to do it. And even as women, I think we're particularly conditioned to do that, aren't we?
Definitely.
So tell us a little bit more about your life. I mean, you're on the farm. Is this the farm you grew up on? Was this?
Yeah.
So it's always been
here.
Part of everything.
Absolutely. It was just, I was born here, and I've lived here my whole life. It started off, my grandparents rented it, and then my dad and uncle started farming with them as well, and then my dad and uncle bought the farm, and so we just have stayed here then ever since. And through growing up, I've noticed, I haven't got any siblings, but I had a lot of cousins, and we all grew up basically in the fields on ponies. And it, like, probably from a toddler, I mean, as a baby, the best way to put a child to sleep was in the tractor with dad. Like, it'd be the hum of the tractor, and he'd put me in the feeders and stuff of the cattle while he was bedding up when I was a toddler, so I could watch the cows. I mean, that was a bit scary, and it did kind of put me off cows for a bit.
I can imagine, as a tiny little, you know, toddler in a tractor, they must have been, big faces.
He'd put me in the round feeders where the hay is, where the cows would reach in and eat, and he'd say, "Don't get eaten."
That's such a dad thing to do, isn't it? That's such a dad thing to do.
And then wonder why your child is a bit scared.
Yeah, not quite sure about the cows, Dad. So what do you
around them?
So yeah, it's in your blood, isn't it?
Definitely.
Then yeah. What do you love? What do you love about the farming life and, you know, the way of the countryside and agriculture?
I love everything, really. I love the fact that everything is kind of going to its own rhythm and it doesn't change. It just seasons go by, and no matter what's going on in the world, crops grow, calves get born, calves grow. Like, there's just a different timetable to everywhere else. And seeing new life and new growth all the time, it's magical watching a cow give birth or a sheep give birth, and then watching that grow and just being a part of the entire cycle.
It must be really
And
grounding.
Also, definitely, like, it's very calming to be able to just kind of have that window of watching things happen, that nothing's like changing it. It's just how it happens. It's nature. Being around that kind of life where you're in control, kind of like you can change bits, but ultimately you're not in control. Mother Nature is, and it does give you a perspective, and that definitely has helped me cope with becoming ill. Is that, like, we already had the perspective of watching life and death, like things go wrong, calves die and cows die and stuff, and you kind of learn how to cope with the hard stuff as well as the good stuff. Like, there's Mother Nature can be just as cruel as she is beautiful.
You're so wise, Holly. You're so wise, and you're so right. And there is, I mean, you know, we tend to kind of like put everything into self-help terms these days, but you know, there's a lot of talk about the power of something called awe, and the power of awe is, you know, when you feel overwhelmed, if you go and stand on top of a hill and look at an enormous view, or that moment you stand at the sea, or as you're describing just then, you know, when you are seeing the cycles of nature, of life and death happen in front of you, and there is something, you know, we can't control. We like to think we're in control, but you know, we don't. Nature will keep turning without us. That's awe, isn't it? And that's what helps us get that perspective. So how important do you think our relationship with nature and the outdoor world is to our well-being and to our health? And do you think that's become even more so with the year we've had?
Definitely. I think people have realised that the outside world is an escape. And I know that people like me realised it a long time ago, that you can be connected to it even if you are in a house in the city and not near it. Nature is everywhere. And I think people have realised this last year, that there's a way of connecting to it even when you can't do the usual things that you're used to doing. Like, you can just watching out the window, it gives you a sense of calm, doesn't it? Just watching the trees change, or like, there's a way of connecting to it that isn't out like at a national park or something that maybe you couldn't get to when you have to stay home.
Yeah, so true. I mean, even in the 5 minutes before we started this call, it got really gloomy outside and it was pouring with rain. And I think that's one of my favorite sounds, or my favorite kind of feelings, is when you're cosseted inside, but there's the sound of the rain and the wind, and just, as you say, just taking those moments to listen and to be aware of it.
Yeah, it takes you out of your reality for a minute, doesn't it?
I think that's important for all of us, especially when we're, you know, having a hard year. For many people, those moments of just being able to reconnect with, and we know from loads and loads of different studies that actually just listening to the sounds of nature, or just, as you say, watching the trees move, the fractals, the patterns that they make when they're blowing in the wind, stimulate part of our brain that automatically reduces our stress response. So, you know, as you say, we don't have to be in the middle of a National Trust property. We can literally just watch the wind in the tree outside the window. Really powerful, isn't it? On your blog, Holly, you talk about the importance of breaking down stereotypes, and you mentioned that at the beginning of our chat. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about how you want to use and how you do use your platform to do that?
I hope that by showing like just my regular life, that it breaks down some stereotypes just naturally. I try to like shove things in people's faces, but at the same time, I mean, growing up, I grew up and went to school in a like very urban school. There wasn't any other like farm children there, and the stereotype is alive and strong of everyone involved in agriculture is an old man, and it was
Yeah.
or that you don't have to have a brain or something, like you're not using your brain or you're wasting your brain kind of thing. And I think it puts a lot of people off even looking at what they could do within food and farming kind of thing, when there's so many parts of it. And I think showing that we're also female and there's loads of parts of it. It's not necessarily always manual. Like I'm a part of it, doing the admin work and the more like dental things, sitting next to a cattle crust, sticking needles in them, like my kind of thing that I can do physically maybe isn't necessarily what a big strong person could do. But there's so many different roles and like technology roles, and that kind of the stereotype is just a person sat on a tractor, usually male, usually older. I think that's one stereotype that I try and show just by showing kind of my life and also sharing other people, like other people who are working within the industry who don't fit the stereotype, who maybe didn't even grow up near it. Like there's so many people who are in it who grew up in a city or never set foot on a farm. And I think they're doing a really good job of showing that.
Face of agriculture is changing, isn't it?
And also part of the stereotypes is like showing that at the same time as showing my life within agriculture, it also shows my life using mobility aids and being disabled, and showing that that isn't also isn't just usual. Like you don't see young people using mobility aids and being confident and proud of that. And that is the big stereotype, is like that it's a weakness or that it's some kind of giving up, or instead of giving life, like they give life, and the stereotype is it's giving up, or that only older people use them, or that older people use them when they don't want to use them. And there's a different side of being disabled than just an older person. And I think we're often forgotten about that there is another side, and it's not the usual shame or anything of that, oh, that poor girl has to use a wheelchair. It's wow, she's using a wheelchair, and that wheelchair is giving her that extra life.
Such an important distinction, such an important reframe, isn't it? To
Yeah.
see, as you say, mobility aids, these allowing me to access life and do the things I want to do, as you say, rather than them being a label for what could be perceived as the negative side of disability. You do great work in this area, and you're a real advocate for inclusivity and accessibility in the countryside. You know, what changes are happening that you think may be helping make that happen, or what still needs to change, in your opinion?
I think like obviously accessibility can only go as far as you can't change the terrain. Like you can't change mud. But to open it up to more people, there are some great like grassroots things. There's things like they're starting things where it's called farmer time, and they connect farmers up with schools, usually city schools, that to show children agriculture so they can start learning about it from a young age. And accessibility wise, there is a lot of ways to go. There's a lot of grassroots things to make it more, they're doing big steps to making it more diverse, but it seems to be leaving behind the accessibility that disabled people would need to get in. I mean, obviously we can't take away the mud, like I say, but there are things that attitudes could change slightly, of maybe just even making things more accessible in that in events they say what the access is. Like there's a lot of things that could change. We're trying something here where we use a radar key. I don't know if you've heard of them. They are on disabled toilets.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, well, they do a padlock as well that's meant to be for bridle ways. So wheelchairs and mobility scooters can get through the gates that normally have a stile. And it's like a padlock. So we've put it on one of the gates that are on the footpath here. And I'm not sure if it's just me and my mum that use it, but but it makes us be able to use it. So hopefully other people who also use wheelchairs or mobility scooters might be able to use it too, in order to get down that track. And hopefully we're going to see how it works, make sure that obviously the concern would be people who are going down that shouldn't be in vehicles might learn to use a key, to buy a key. But I hope that we can kind of see how it goes, and then maybe approach some other people in the area of this could go on your gates that have footpaths through and could make them more open.
That sounds fantastic. And as you say, the more people see it working, this works, the more confident they're going to be to, give it a go. And you said something there that I think is really pertinent and very true, because when we think about accessibility, we often do think about, things like terrain and, how to get mobility aids through spaces and making sure that somewhere is, for example, wheelchair access friendly. But you said for attitudes to change. And I thought, yes, no, that is part of accessibility, is people's mindsets changing and being willing to give things like the radar key a go.
Yeah, definitely. And like, there's so much more to accessibility than just wheelchairs, isn't there? There's people who are visually impaired and being able to, or hearing impaired and deaf. Like, there's a lot of disabilities that could quite easily work within agriculture and farming, especially the technical side and stuff, and they won't get a fair chance at the moment.
No. And invisible disabilities, such as autism, for example.
People with any kind of disability, like if they have a passion for working in agriculture and they are able to work, they are well enough to work, or then there should be something that encourages them of, yes, there is a pathway here for you. Like, there are so many different jobs across the sector, and people won't ever be inspired to work in them if they don't see themselves in them.
Representation, as you say, is key, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm so glad that, there are people like yourself, Holly, advocating and making this happen, as you say, making those connections. And I think you're really, it's a really good example of where social media is positive and it works, isn't it? Because it can get a really bad rap, social media, definitely. Instagram and so forth. But, you alluded at the beginning of our chat that actually it's allowed you to make valuable connections and help people see things from a different point of view.
Yeah, definitely. It can get a very bad rap, and the comparison part on it is hard to ignore. But it can also be really good, and it can also be the only way some people can connect to each other.
Yeah,
I think it's
definitely
what you make it.
Yeah, very true. It's what you make it, and who you choose to, in the same way we talk about how we nourish our bodies, we can apply that same thinking to everything we consume, including social media, can't we?
Definitely.
And how we consume it. And talking about comparison, that brings me on to, you've written some really beautiful poetry on your website. I read some of your poems. They're really, really lovely. What does poetry bring you?
The way of putting thoughts down onto paper, and it just gets them out of your head, doesn't it? And it kind of, I don't know where it comes from, to be honest. It's not something I can do on demand. I've tried. It just kind of happens, and it's nice to be able to get it out. And some I share, some I don't, but it's nice sometimes to get it out and then write it and think, this could actually help someone else who might have felt the same. And
most definitely.
think, and think, well, I'll share it then if it could help someone else.
Yeah, I think it is beautiful, and I would urge any of our listeners to go and take a look at some of your writing and your poetry. And I do think that's the best. Quite often, in my experience, the best pieces of writing come when they almost are beyond, the words are almost beyond your thought process. They kind of just spill out onto the paper. don't they? And
Yeah.
there's like an urge to get this out and down onto the written word.
Yeah, I definitely see that with your writing as well. Yours, it's straight from inside you.
Oh, thank you, Holly. Yeah. And I have to be honest, I work on the same. I can't do it on demand. There are times where it just, I'll plan a post and I can't, nope. And other days
Yeah.
I just have to get these words out and I push it out there. And I don't know about you, but I sometimes feel very vulnerable doing it.
Oh yeah, very definitely. You kind of think post, right, run.
Don't look. That's exactly what I do. Post, and I always have a good couple of hours where I think, oh, should I delete? Shall I delete? Shall I delete? And then but I don't. And for the same reason, is that you hope that by sharing that experience, somebody else knows that they're not alone in that. And
Yeah.
how would you encourage other people to overcome their limiting beliefs they may have about, going back to that wonderful phrase right at the beginning about creating a life within it? That's so important, and I think that's so true. I mean, how would you encourage people to think about what they can do and they can achieve?
The hardest part is encouraging them to stop comparing to other people of like, well, I should be there, or I should do that, or well, so and so did this and they're now doing this. I think it's about listening to you and knowing that what you think is best for your body and for you to do what you think you can do right at that moment is enough. And like, instead of constantly putting pressure of, well, I should be doing this.
They're really damaging, the shoulds, the musts, the ought tos.
Definitely. They're not needed, are they?
No, we don't need shoulds and musts and ought tos. We need more wants in the world, and recognizing that you have a right to this. And I think you're so right. I think we've got so used to validating ourselves by what's happening outside of ourselves and that comparison. But actually, if we just go back, and we'll always go back to those core values and beliefs and what feels right for my body at this time, then you're only ever going to feel aligned, aren't you? I kind of describe it sometimes when I've talked about this before, is when we go and make choices that don't feel right for us emotionally or physically, I feel really discombobulated inside. I feel kind of like out of place. It all feels, I'm uncomfortable I'm uncomfortable doing that thing. But actually, when you make a choice that's coming from a place where it's, your inner self talking, it's much easier to make good things happen, I think.
Definitely. And to like just listen to yourself also helps you stop fighting what is happening that you can't control. Like, to learn to live within the situation you've been put in. That you kind of, people on the outside looking and think, oh, I couldn't do that. But you can do a lot more than you think you can once you don't have a choice. And if you ended up in that position, you would learn over time how to build a life within it. Like, it's not this really hard like thing that's so far out of reach. Once you're there, like, anybody could find themselves in any challenge. They could lose their job, and before that they'd have probably thought, oh, I don't know what I'd do, I wouldn't cope. And then they learn how to build a life within what's just happened.
And it's building resilience, isn't it? And definitely. As you were talking then, I was thinking about the quote that Pam has on her website, which I just think sums it up really, which is, and it's very pertinent because it's front of mind this week, but she says, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. And I think that's so true.
Absolutely.
So true.
You can't, people like to say, I mean, people have said to me before, oh, well, to like get to where you are now, did you just tell yourself to get better or to start improving? I was like, no, life doesn't work like that. Bodies don't work like that.
Excuse me, would you mind just not? Just don't. No.
But it doesn't work. You can't just kind of think your way out of things, but you can just learn that where we are right now, that's okay. You know, we can be happy here, and if improvement comes along, that's great. If it doesn't, we've found peace here, and we've made what we can with what we've got.
We can be happy here. Oh, I've got so many beautiful sound bites from you today, Holly. We can be happy here. Beautiful sound bites. And I guess part of that, in amongst all of that, is self-care, isn't it? And I'm not talking about bubble baths and spa breaks. I'm talking about the kind of important stuff that goes back to what you were saying about listening to what you need and what your body needs. How do you build that into your life? I mean, how do you take care of your own, mental and emotional well-being?
Badly, a lot of the time. I'm very much a perfectionist, and it's something that I know a lot of people probably relate to, of wanting to like get it ticked off, and often forgetting that they have to tick their own stuff off too.
Yeah.
Doing stuff for other people and wanting everything to be perfect, what you do. And I have to consciously make time. I think my self-care is making time to say stop.
Yeah.
You don't need to do that all today. Stop, rest, pause, look through some pictures that you like, or put a cozy blanket on and actually warm up.
Yes. Yeah. No. And we forget about simple things like that, being physically comfortable and warm and wearing clothes that are soft, and, all those really small things actually over a day impact on how we feel, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, for a long time, like, my life was self-care. I couldn't do things. I had to constantly focus on, well, I need to stick within this energy limit, and like turning over or going to the bathroom or something, they were things that, well, do that. Now I need to give my body like rest and proper rest. And then as slightly more functioning creeps in, you add more to the to-do list, and that kind of goes by the wayside of, well, it needs to come with, there needs to be another side, needs to be a compromise. You've done that, you need to give yourself something as well.
Yeah. And it's those small, and it is about building things up small, really small steps, isn't it? And I can imagine for you that was imperative, really important to not ever push too hard. Because I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure if you ever did, your body just let you know quite quickly.
Absolutely. It lets me know all the time.
Yeah. Time to stop.
Yeah, time to stop, or you won't speak anymore. It definitely, and I think people who are well and healthy, they don't listen to those warning signs. There is a point where everyone comes to where their body should say stop, and that's self-care, listening to that stop.
Yeah, and not listening when it's screaming.
Yeah.
Listening when it's whispering, when it begins with, you're a little bit tired, you don't have to do that today, as opposed to the time when, we're at burnout, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And doing something that's just nice for you, that doesn't tick another box off. That's something that I try and not very well, but try and add in of, don't, it's the thing that doesn't tick a box, that you just do because it makes you feel good.
Yeah, definitely. So Holly, if you were on a mountain, so I always ask the question, if you were on a mountain and you had the whole world below you, what would you say? My brother likes to ask the question, if you had a billboard at the side of the M25. So take your pick, the billboard or the mountain. But, what would you like to share with people?
That is such a hard question.
I know, it's a mega one, isn't it? Everyone goes, oh, that's a hard one. Someone once asked me it, and I went, oh, that's a good one. We'll have that one.
That is such a hard one. I think I'd tell them that practice acceptance of whatever situation you're in. It doesn't mean acceptance as in, like, this is great. It's accepting that this is hard, or that just accepting whatever reality is, and it stops you longing for something that it isn't, and accepting what's in that moment, that recognizing everything instead of ignoring them. For a long time, I thought that the only way to acceptance was to pretend everything's rosy and, look for all the rainbows and avoid getting wet. But it's actually looking at everything that's happening, all the hard things, all the things that make you scream, and knowing and accepting that they're there, and there's also happiness there, and they all coexist and mix together. If you don't accept where you are, you're constantly fighting what you're in, and you can't really change the situation in that moment. You can work towards it if you're in a job you don't like or something, but to accept you're actually in it right at that moment, it's some kind of peace, isn't it?
I'm a little bit blown away by your answer, to be honest, Holly. I think it's one of the wisest, and I feel a bit emotional listening to it, because I think we live in a world that's very toxically positive, the self-help world, isn't it? And it's all about positive mental mindset and so forth. But in equal measure, that is where happiness lies, is when you can, what was it you just said? Accepting when it's hard as well, and being with it. That's really, really wise. It really is.
It's taken a lot of years to learn.
No, but it is incredibly wise. So just gather myself, sorry, I am an emotional creature, I have to say.
Don't worry, so am I.
Finally, Holly, where could people find your blog? Where can they see what you're up to on the farm? Where can they find more about you?
They can find my blog at oneGirlAndHerCows.co.uk, and that basically is a behind the scenes of everything, everything farming, me, everything basically. And then attached to that is the Instagram account to it, also One Girl and Her Cows. That's kind of the more behind the scenes. Everyday life. Everyday life.
And I think it's fascinating to see what goes on the farm. Do we see the calf being born today? Is there?
Not today. She decided to have it where the calving camera didn't quite reach. So I could see it from my bed with some binoculars at the TV in my room. I was laid in bed watching, thinking, why have you had it at that end?
At that angle? Don't you know I'm on Instagram?
Exactly. I mean, we can see the calf bouncing around.
Oh, that's so exciting. That's such a beautiful sight. But do you know what? That is a case in point about nature, and about what you said at the beginning about we can think we have control, but it's always just going to do its thing.
Oh, yeah.
With or without us. Holly, thank you so much for joining us today. You have had so many words of sage advice and wisdom. You really have. For having me. And I can't wait to share this with our listeners. I really can't. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you're able to take something of value away from today's episode. Perhaps one small action you can put into practice today. If you are enjoying Reframe, then please do subscribe and rate the podcast, as this helps us reach more lovely listeners. As always, here at Reframe Club, we are rooting for you.